What's going on, guys? Welcome to an episode of Eastern Current. Tonight, I've got Jeff on, and we are going to talk about some late summer trends that we're seeing. It's a great time of year to get out and throw topwater. Good time of year to catch big trout on topwater, redfish. We'll kind of get into some other stuff too, kind of let you know what we've been seeing on the water. Jeff and I have both been on the water pretty much every day of the week. So kind of seeing those changes, those late summer changes, and definitely some stuff to pick up on no matter where you are up and down the coast of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, all the way down into Florida and Texas. These are things that as the seasons start to change here a little bit can really help you catch more fish. So want to thank tonight's podcast is sponsored by Berkeley. We got some baits from them that we're going to talk about here that y'all will like and definitely want to get your hands on. Everything's been so hard to find lately in the tackle shops and even online. But I do know that they do have these in stock right now, and been fishing some of them, really like them. Some of this I have not fished yet, but excited to show that to y'all. But we're just going to talk about, like I said, the summer trends. We're going to have a heavy focus on topwater, and that is going to be tonight's show. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Jeff on. What's up, dude?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. How was your fishing today?
It was pretty good. We had a pretty strong morning on topwater. First thing, we had, let's see here, it was pretty low tide actually this morning starting off, so a little bit tougher of a topwater bite, but we still got a couple blow-ups and managed to land a few, and then finished the day off strong in the afternoon. So it was a good day overall.
Heck yeah. We caught a fish on topwater today. It was a white dotter shark. It was definitely the first white dot I've ever caught on topwater. They were like schooling underneath the boat. We were fishing out in the ocean for redfish and flounder, and they just kept. I was taking menhaden and throwing them like out in front of the sharks, and they were going nuts, chasing them. And menhaden's jumping out of the water, and the sharks chasing around. And so we did that, and ended up throwing a topwater to one. And my client Paul, who I fished with a good bit, he hooked him and landed him. They were recording it. They were watching the video afterwards. And it doesn't matter what it is. If Paul catches it on topwater, he's like so fired up. He's like, "Whoa, topwater!" Which was pretty funny. And then we very quickly left, went and sat on the jetty for a little bit looking for a big red. I think we had pulled one off, and that was it. But overall, pretty slow afternoon for me. I'm hoping to change that up tomorrow. You kind of had, and this is where a lot of people, I think you're really good at reading the conditions and the day and knowing what you can get away with. But like you were catching, like you said, you went scouting after your trip today, some stuff you hadn't fished in a while, and still had some fish eating topwater at like 1 o'clock?
Yeah, we did. We fortunately had a good amount of cloud cover almost all day, so that really extended that topwater bite throughout the afternoon. I don't know if it would have been the optimal bait to be throwing, but still with that overcast conditions, it allows you to still be, working that topwater plug in the afternoon. Caught had a couple blow-ups, but it was an overall pretty good afternoon, good scouting mission.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about a topwater, especially like if you're not dead set on like having to catch a fish. It's such a good scouting tool because, who knows if you're throwing like a gold spoon or a spinnerbait, like if a fish follows and then doesn't eat it. Like you can learn a lot about an area by throwing a topwater.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just that the weight of the lure and being able to cast it really long distances, work it at a faster pace, so you're just covering a ton of ground.
For sure.
Really have a lot of confidence in scouting new areas with it.
Do you think that and this is me asking this question, I feel like I know what you'll say, but for the sake of the podcast, do you think that overcast is the key factor to why you got topwater blow-ups later on in the day, or is there some other stuff that plays into it?
I definitely think there's some other stuff that plays into it. I've had days where it's pretty bright and sunny, and I'm hearing fish blowing up in the grass, and for whatever reason, they're real fired up on bait up on the surface. But general rule of thumb, I think on those more overcast days, it does play a big factor, and I think those fish get fired up on topwater plugs more so when it's overcast.
Yeah, I would agree. Or low light, even if it's early in the morning, late in the evening. That's one thing I haven't done in a while is like topwater fish in the evening. But now that I got a family and whatnot, I usually don't get to fish in the evening. I want to be back home, but that's a fun bite too, watching the sun go down and having fish eat a topwater plug. is
Now,
probably better than the morning. You don't have to work as hard for it. You can just kind of lazily slide out there at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, start throwing a topwater. So personally, what would you say aside from like low light? So we've already got low light is a key factor for throwing topwater. What would you say is like the optimal like tide, wind, other weather conditions, and tide conditions for when you're throwing a topwater? What are you looking for?
sure.
Can it be too high? Can it be too low?
Yeah. I'll throw topwater plugs throughout, all tides. But if I had to choose one, I'd say a higher tide. I'd say a higher tide and falling because a lot of that bait has just been flushed up into the grass and now it's flushing back out.
Yeah.
So you have bait it's coming out of the grass, right? They're up there to get protection from predators, and now they're moving back out as the water's falling out. And redfish are just typically, and other fish too, trout and flounder and stuff like that are working those banks and just blowing up on fish as they're coming out of the grass. So at a higher tide and falling, that's typically my favorite tide to fish topwaters. What else? What else were you saying?
No, I think that kind of answers that for the most part. And one thing that I was thinking, well, I was going to try to ask you this so that you would answer this too, but I might just say it myself because for myself too, I think one of the key or one of the things to think about is like dependent upon where the tide's at. Like you said, you can catch them on topwater at any tide, but where you're throwing that topwater and what you're looking for can definitely change. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so on like a lower tide, I might be throwing it over like the gut in a creek, or like if I'm on a bigger flat, throwing it out off the edge further, as to where like if I've got high water, let's say I've got one angler and I'm on my skiff, or one angler and I'm running the trolling motor. If I can get them like right up against the edge of the grass where they can make long casts and keep that bait the entire retrieve like 3 to 5 feet off the grass line, that seems to be more effective than like being far away throwing to it, because when that on that high falling, like you're talking about, those fish are hunting right on that edge of grass. Like if you're fishing bait on a bank like that in that tide, you want your bait like a foot from the grass, because that's where those fish are mostly patrolling. So just those fish will come to a topwater, but I feel like at a higher tide, 90% of those fish, if they're not eating it up by the grass, they're hearing it from there or seeing it and moving off the bank to eat it.
Right.
Do you? What are some other things you might look for, like at a lower tide, like places that you might throw a topwater plug?
100%. Like, it does change where you're throwing that plug, depending upon the tide, right? Like you were saying, at a higher tide, you're working it really close to that bank, and as that tide falls out, those fish fall out as well. So a lot of times they're in the bends of creeks, little tidal pools and stuff. So just in areas where I know fish are hanging out, I'm kind of casting in those areas.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's out in the middles of the creeks and not necessarily right up against the banks.
Yeah, definitely.
So it does change throughout the tides.
Little
sure.
eddies behind oyster bars or points or
Right.
deeper guts, and those are spots like when the tide's high, it's easier to kind of find those spots to catch redfish on topwater. When it's low, it seems like that might be the time that's a little more difficult. It's like the one thing that switches. Usually everything's easier at low tide fishing wise, but I would say the topwater, like at a higher tide, is definitely a good way. Or it would be maybe easier. I don't know. It seems to be easier. Those fish are maybe more drawn to it at that part of the time.
I think also at low tide you get those fish that are really concentrated in areas. So a lot of times you get that plug, you just get maybe one or two fish out of that spot, whereas opposed to a little bit higher tide, they're a little bit more spread out. So you'll get one fish here, one fish there, and they're not spent after just catching one.
Yeah,
one
you're not
out
blowing them out, educating.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. It really is. I don't know. It's tough. What do you early in the morning? It's hard. It's hard. Like that low tide early in the morning, I usually don't find myself throwing a topwater. Like I get nervous about it. I usually try to sight fish. I guess that's also what we typically are trying to do anyways, is sight fish if that tide's low.
This summer I've liked throwing a topwater plug at a low tide early on in the morning. If I know where a couple groups of happy fish are.
Yeah.
But I think you're limited in your opportunity, right? I think you get like one, maybe two out of that group of fish before they kind of catch on and they don't really want to plug anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of time. Um, Honestly, that happened this morning. We were on a small group of fish. I started waking and mudding them, and I was like, all right, we're gonna get a fish here. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, we got a nice redfish on topwater. But there were still fish swimming around us, but they were not wanting that plug anymore.
Yeah, yeah, they
So,
feel that pressure so much, and it seems like they forget less. When that tide's low, like once they get
yeah,
uneasy, they have a hard time settling back down for sure. And
yeah,
it's a lot. Like you don't realize at low tide how much, especially like in a creek. Maybe not as much on like in a bay or a flat, but like in a creek, once you've hooked a fish, they've heard that top water, the boat's kind of rocking a little bit. And one thing a lot of people forget, like once they hook a fish on top water, they're all fired up and they're like hopping around the boat and like climbing down. It's like that's all right. You found them at that point. That's like the most important time to be extremely quiet. But it's always like high fives and like jumping off the front deck down into the cockpit.
right,
You're like, all right, this spot's blown.
right. Yep,
That
yep,
seems to happen quite a bit.
yeah.
It's
What's your,
do what?
what's your ideal conditions for topwater? If you had to pick a perfect topwater day, what would you say it would be?
I would say, one thing that I used to always, be or believe the myth of like, maybe it's not a myth, maybe it's just me that thought this, but like it has to be like slick calm to throw a topwater plug. You really want it to be slick calm, but some wind
Yeah,
texture is definitely nice. Like not choppy, but like a little bit of texture to break that plug up a little bit. I think it makes it look more natural, maybe. So maybe like 5 to 8 mile an hour breeze, a little texture, not sloppy, but just some texture on the surface. Overcast or low light conditions, even like especially like an overcast morning. If you can have like heavy cloud cover when it's with like 5 to 7 mile an hour breeze early in the morning with like a mid to high tide rising or falling, that's juicy. That's definitely juicy.
yeah,
Low barometric pressure
for sure.
would be, I would. I used to try to think about those things but now it's like you just got to go and try it, see what's gonna happen.
Well, you're just gonna go anyway,
Right.
right? You're not gonna not go. So it's like, yeah, it's fun to look at and make those connections, but at the end of the day, you're going either way. So,
Exactly.
um, um, as far as wind texture goes, do you change the style of your plug based off of those conditions?
Yeah, so if it is windier, I'll usually throw a little bit bigger plug. One thing that does well for me in some heavier windier conditions is like a one knocker, a little bit longer plug. Maybe one without a keel, like a Skitter Walk doesn't have a keel, but like the Skitter V has a keel. But the Skitter Walk its shape has a little bit more of a keel to it than like a spook does or like a one knocker does. And this new plug from Berkeley is essentially this. It's the same size as as a one knocker, but it's the Jaywalker 120. Let me see if I can get the glare off of it. So they've got two sizes. They've got the 100. These are some of the top waters I want to talk about. I'm gonna switch over to my screen real quick so people can see it that are watching. But the 100 and it's so hard to center these up, and the 120, both awesome plugs. And the cool thing about these Berkeley plugs too is the hooks. A lot of hooks you get on top waters like straight out of the box are pretty garbage, or they won't last very long. You'll bend them out. But really stout hooks on these. They're also doing this prop bait, the Chopo 120, and they've got different sizes of these as well. And they've also got they don't have it in these are all saltwater hooks, saltwater gear on them as far as the split rings and the hooks and all the metal is a stainless. But they make my favorite wake bait. I fished a lot of wake baits, and the Berkeley, God, I'm forgetting the name of it now. It's I forget the name of their wake bait. I got a bunch on my boat right now. Is my favorite, definitely my favorite wake bait, and the paint jobs and the colors and stuff are real creative, a little different. Maybe some bass background to it, but the other cool thing too about this Jaywalker, and I know people are kind of back and forth on if you want 2 or 3 hooks on some of these plugs, but especially trout fishing. And this time of year too, this like late summer, early fall. We're not into early fall yet, but we're definitely into late summer. You'll be, if you're working topwaters in that like 2 to 3 foot range, you'll start to find these trout mixed in with these redfish, not swimming with them, but like in very similar areas, because they're all kind of getting sucked into where those mullet are hanging out, where they're getting funneled or where they're getting kind of like, choked up in a pocket. I've been catching trout, especially in our river, in areas I'm targeting redfish. You get kind of a softer blow up and reel it in, and it ends up being a nice trout. But having those 3 hooks is definitely nice. Definitely the only part that's not nice about it is if the fish takes it deep, or if they or unhooking them at the boat. But the nice thing about the 3 hooks too, with the trout on a bigger plug, like you're able to work a bigger plug. Those bigger trout a lot of times are going to eat it, and you've got that 3rd hook on that bait, so that you have a better chance of hooking that fish. Obviously, that's what hooks are for, so that's why they put 3 of them on there. But yeah, these are some new plugs that I'm fishing. Real excited about them. I've also got. Well, tell me about. Let's go into this, and I won't just talk about the Berkeley, because I do fish other baits as well. This Berkeley is a nice one. What are some of your favorite plugs to fish, Jeff?
Man, I honestly I like them all, and fish them all, really. I think they definitely have a little bit of a different. Each one of them has a little bit of a different sound, and some work a little bit easier than others. But man, I definitely like the one knocker. You got me on that. That's been a good plug for sure. Especially on those little windier mornings. I'll try that bigger plug. I like the Mirror Lure Top Dog and the Top Dog Junior. That's always been a really good plug for me. This Skitter Walk's great too. I think they're all pretty good. But I'd say if I had to choose one, I'd probably do maybe the Mirror Lure Top Dog.
Mirror Lure Top Dog.
In that orange and black color.
You and Cameron both really like the Mirror Lure plugs. Yeah. I see y'all fish them a lot. Is there anything in particular about that one that you prefer? Like why that plug?
I think it's pretty easy for people to throw. Some of them are a little bit trickier. I also think the one knocker, isn't there like the one knocker, but it's slightly smaller?
Yeah, so there's a head and spook, which is a little bit smaller. Then there's a spook junior, and then there's like the full size spook. I don't know if that's the actual name, but the full size spook's like the 3 hook head.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I like the spook, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I just know just by picking it up which ones throw a little bit easier. But I think those mirror lures throw a little bit easier. It's easier for people to walk them a little bit.
Yeah, I've noticed with that mirror lure how it's got like a pot belly on it that like sticks down in the water a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think that almost works like a little bit of a pivot point for that plug as you're walking it. It kind of cuts back and forth a little bit easier. Like you can be a little sloppier with it, and it'll still walk a little bit. That's one of the toughest things with topwater, especially with clients on the boat that might not have worked a topwater, or you think like, oh, we should start early, we'll get them on a topwater bite. But some people pick it up pretty quick, and some people really struggle with getting that cadence and that timing down. If you could kind of explain, and it's hard to do without a rod, but if you could explain how to work a topwater, just here on the podcast, what would you say?
I'd say it's a lot like rubbing your belly and patting the top of your head at the same time. It's definitely a little bit of an awkward motion that's tricky for most people to get down right off the back. You're trying to get this zigzagging motion because just about all topwater plugs that we use are that walk the dog style lure. So what you're trying to do is basically get that. We got that one right here. You're trying to get that plug just to kind of zigzag as it's being retrieved, right? So what you're doing that is you're twitching your rod tip kind of like this. I don't know if you can.
I can see
that. But you're just kind of twitching your rod tip and you're keeping your rod tip low to the water. It's much easier when you're showing somebody with a rod, but you're twitching that rod tip slowly as you're retrieving it on the reel, which makes that action as you're retrieving it.
It's funny
But
the like a walk the dog plug. I wonder if I'm sure I could find the history of it, but when it was invented, like I wonder if it was. I doubt it was invented to like as a walk the dog lure. Like I feel like the first plug was probably like, oh, you throw it out and you just reel it and it slides back to you on the surface. Like that
yeah,
walk the dog kind of was probably invented later on, but it really does seem to outfish. Like there's a lot of styles of topwaters that are fished in fresh and salt water. And I couldn't say it for the bass world. I think that like whopper ploppers, like the tail prop baits, the chopo, and some other topwaters, frogs and whatnot, they might get fished more. But in saltwater, the walk the dog plug is definitely the main used topwater. And there really
yeah,
hasn't been much experiment. But I would say, I guess I fish it more than any other too, and have people fish it. But I wonder why that plug it does so well, and why it seems to outfish other topwaters.
yeah.
Because you say it looks like a hurt bait fish, but it really doesn't. Like it really looks nothing like a hurt bait fish.
Uh, I mean, yeah,
I guess
it
it does.
definitely.
I guess it looks like a mullet that's kind of been knocked around and is zigzagging around.
Yeah, you'll sometimes see mullet kind of zigzagging around when they're fleeing or they're kind of spooked. They do that a little bit, especially if you get one that's got a messed up tail or is a little bit injured. But it is kind of rare that you ever see a mullet zigzagging down a bank. It's
Right.
especially not like your plug, but for whatever reason, it just gets them fired up and sets them off.
It does.
Maybe somewhat of it's like a pissed off reaction bite, right? They just come from 5, 10 feet away and just absolutely smack it.
Those are the best when you can see them waking from a few feet away. They get up on the surface before they get to the
Yeah.
plug. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that people usually set the hook before the fish is really eating it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's when you don't set the hook. Don't set the hook. Don't set the hook. Don't do
Let him eat
it.
it. Let him eat it. Yeah, that's the biggest thing I always try to share with people is like, keep walking that plug no matter what kind of
Yeah.
topwater it is until you feel the pressure of the fish. Then you can set the hook. But
Yeah.
so often it's hard to know. But I have this theory that like, as you're sometimes the fish will blow your bait up and not be hooked at all, but the plug will be underwater still and you don't see it, and then it kind of
hmm
wiggles its way back up. I really think the plug gets eaten a lot of times the second time underwater, especially like when you have a couple fish on it, and you don't really know it. You think that maybe that fish, because the reason this started is there was one time two fish came up on this plug. The guy was walking it. One ate it, like pulled it down, and I saw it under the surface. It was really clear water, and it was like a foot and a half under the surface. And the guy was still walking it, and another fish came up and ate it underwater. And,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and I think that happens more times than not when you're like, it gets taken down. Like a lot of times when a redfish eats it, even if he takes it straight down, he's pulling drag pretty quick. But you have those
hmm
weird times where like you're still walking it, and then all of a sudden you feel some pressure and it takes off. Like I really think that's like a secondary eat underwater, and that's why it's so important to continue to
Yeah.
walk it.
Yeah. No, that definitely does happen quite often where they take it down and one spits it or he just doesn't quite connect and you got another fish nearby that just sees it and just comes up and hits it. And yeah, 100%. Keep working that plug, making that thing look realistic is essential.
Yeah, the main problem too is if you set the hook too early and you rip it away from that zone, then
Yeah, you're
there's
out
no,
of strike
you're
zone.
out of the strike zone. You got to keep it in there. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing is just keep working it until you feel that pressure. Do you change the hooks out on any of your plugs, or do you are you like me? You'll fish those hooks, and the only reason you change them out is when they get rusty.
I'm like more like you.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll get on a kick. I'll like go buy some hooks when I buy top waters and change them out. But
I wait. Yeah, I pretty much wait till they get rusty, which I mean a lot of times doesn't take very long. You know.
which plugs out of the box have your favorite hooks on them?
Hmm. I don't know. I haven't paid much attention to it.
It's tough. It seems like Mirror Lure and like the Berkeley plugs, they've got
Hmm.
pretty stout hooks straight out of the
Right.
box. But then you've got
A little.
like your skitter walks and stuff like that, your Impalas, and they aren't as stout, but they're like a lighter, sharper wire hook. Like I feel like that they're a little tackier. Like you'll hook those fish that slap at it, and you'll get on the side of the face and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I think I like those. those thinner hooks.
Yeah.
I've tried both of them now, and I have had a little bit thicker hooks lately, and I think the thinner ones definitely have a little bit of a better hookup ratio.
Yeah.
Actually got here.
Yeah, I feel like your longevity of the hook and like being able to fish the same hooks longer, those stouter hooks that are definitely going to be the ticket. But those like nickel hooks, those dark black ones that you'll see in a lot of plugs that are thinner gauge, they're definitely tackier. They'll definitely stick those
I
fish a
have
little
had
better.
some of those bend out a little bit.
Yeah, they'll definitely. You got to fish light drag. And that's another important thing to talk about. I feel like is like what kind of rod to throw a topwater on, and
Mhm.
like correct me or if you feel differently, but um, it boils down to me. One, you want a rod that's like a topwater is a little bit heavier of a rod or a little bit heavier of a lure, and people think that you want to fish them on like a really light rod, but you want that backbone. Like some rods will collapse on you. You go to cast a topwater and like you're not going to quite get the distance because it's too soft and it'll kind of collapse. You don't really get that punch back out. It doesn't have enough power to like as it flexes to re-throw that bait forward. But you definitely want a light tip, like that light tip with the treble hooks. If you've got a stiff rod, you're gonna pull hooks on a treble hook bait a lot more often than if you've got a lot of give. You want give and light drag with trebles. Like you look at the guys that catch 50, 60 pound king mackerels on live bait rigs with treble hooks. They're fishing mono, which is stretchy, and they're fishing super light drag. Like they're super super light drag. You could pinch it between two fingers and just pull the drag off their rod. And that's for that reason of keeping those trebles, keeping that constant pressure, but not pulling too hard. You'll pull those trebles out. What was my question? I like asked you a question and just talked right through it.
I think you pretty much answered the question. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Definitely spot on with those rods. You want something that you can crank a plug out there, but also something that's soft enough so where you're not going to pull those treble hooks out is very important. So, I mean, most of the rods really I throw are pretty universal. Something that
like a medium fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is just all around can be used for just about everything that we're throwing out there.
Sure.
So.
You've been getting a little creative with your topwaters lately. I feel like we all do that. Like every year, like in the summer, me and Cameron and Mike are like sending each other pictures of like weird topwaters that we've gotten.
Yeah, I have yet to throw that jitterbug, but I want to.
You haven't thrown it?
I've thrown it in the water once, but I didn't fish it. I just wanted to see what it looked like. I mean, it's got good action. It's a little bit big and definitely an aggressive plug, but it does have that zigzagging motion to where you can just straight retrieve it and it still has that motion.
I remember throwing those as a kid for like largemouth and smallmouth bass, the jitterbug. It's an obnoxious bait. It's definitely kind of loud, like a tink tink. It has because it's got that big metal cupped face on it.
Yeah,
they're pretty they've got that metal sound to them, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Like it's got a little tinny ting to it.
It does, especially if you're shaking it. I don't know that it does necessarily when you're retrieving it as much, but it does if you're it's definitely got a little bit of a rattly sound to it for sure because it's got that big metal plate and those trebles hitting on that plate make that noise. But if the trebles are kind of pushed towards the back, I don't know if it does as much.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but maybe it would work. Maybe it's a game changer for those clients that can't throw topwaters. I don't know. I'm still trying to find it.
For me, it's been the wake bait. The wake bait has been that key to being able to.
Have you found one that doesn't get fouled?
Yeah, the Berkeley one. The Berkeley one's awesome.
Really?
The shape of those definitely fouls up, and the hooks that come on those 6 cents ones, they're just the front hook, that lead hook's too big, so it just wraps that front line a lot. And every wake bait that I've thrown will still foul for some reason. I guess because that front, it's a shorter bait, so that front hook is so close to the line. But I've thrown a lot of crankbaits and stuff for bass, and I just don't remember that happening on crankbaits a lot. But correct me if I'm wrong. If anyone knows why those wake baits foul a lot, please leave a comment because I would love to know and fix it up. Like I put smaller hooks on and then it just feels like unbalanced and like that hook's not in the right, like it's too small. But essentially a wake bait, like especially on really calm days, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but those wake baits, they're a great topwater bait, and they kind of disappear in choppy water, like they're harder to throw. But they'll still get eaten. Like even if you're retrieving it and it's under the surface and you can't see it, the fish will smoke those things. So you don't have to see it. You'll end up seeing the eat, but you won't see the bait. But another good search bait. Cast it out and wobble.
Have you messed around much with the sizes of the wake baits?
No, but I've just got some new Berkeley ones in that are really little. That I'm excited about. The 6 cents one is the biggest one that I fished, and then the Berkeley. God, what is it? Maybe it's a bull wake. I think it's called a bull wake. Berkeley bull wake or wake bull. Or I think it's bull wake. They're like standard, straightforward size one is it's like the size of a normal crankbait, like a little square bill crankbait. I really like that one. They were eating it really good the other day. The way that the redfish eat a freaking wake bait is awesome. Like they usually just smoke it from behind. They don't miss it. It's like just in the back of their throat. And same with the trout. The trout seem to like the wake bait a lot. Have you thrown the wake bait much? You got some 6 cents ones that got pretty annoyed with them, didn't you?
I have a couple different ones. I can't remember what the brand is. I'd have to look.
Tackle Warehouse, late night on Tackle Warehouse.
Yeah, I got a couple different brands of them. Yeah, a couple of Tackle Warehouse buys. The only thing that I've been able to do is put the rubber bands on them, and that helps with getting them fouled up. You got those small little rubber bands, the really thin ones, so that if it does need to stretch or break away, it will. But you slide that on the plug just to where kind of the belly of the plug is, and you wrap that front treble hook around the belly, and it pulls it back. I think I saw this.
Dang, that's awesome. I've never even heard of that. So you're kind of like flattening it up to the belly of the bait?
Yeah. So the wake bait, the front hook gets sent back like this, right? And then you put a rubber band right around this base, so that plug just kind of sits there like that. So it doesn't have quite as much freedom as it would without that rubber band, but that rubber band does keep it nice and tucked so it doesn't get caught up on your line. So what Jud and I are talking about is this front hook is always getting fouled and hooked up on your line right up here, and it just as soon
on the
as you
cast,
cast out the hands, it's not swimming right. So you have to reel it back in and recast, and it happens almost like on some plugs, 1 in every 3 casts it feels like. So on some of those plugs, I've tied rubber bands on them, and that has helped a lot. I don't know if it makes a big difference on the hookup ratio. It's hard to say, but it does help with it not fouling up. So
yeah, that's a really good trick. Like pretty much the rubber bands. As you talking like braces, rubber bands, like
exactly
those little circle ones. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, little ones like that.
Yeah, that's a good hack. That's I'll have to get some of those for sure. I might need some for tomorrow. I'm going topwater fishing in the morning. So, where did you find those rubber bands? Did you just get them on Amazon or something?
They have. I got a handful of them from Cameron. I can't remember where he got them, but I know that they have a handful of them over at Intercoastal Angler.
Oh yeah, for rigging baits, like for bridling baits and whatnot.
Yeah, there's just a pack of like 1,000 of them. I don't know if they have any small packs, but they do have some small black rubber bands over there.
Okay, sweet. That's good to know. I'm gonna have to pick some of those up. While I'm thinking about it, this is another bait that I got from Berkeley. So this is very similar, if not the same mold. Sabile was a tackle company for a long time, and I know that they were bought out by Pure Fishing, and this is called the Magic Swimmer, but they have a soft I don't know if they're still making the soft plastic, but there was a soft plastic lure as well with like a hook that like a worm hook that came from here and like came out on the top on the back right there. But this bait is an incredible search bait. One, it's a great trout bait. I've caught tarpon on this down in the Keys with Adam, my buddy Adam down there. We've caught them on the soft plastic version. Caught trout, redfish, flounder, everything on this bait right here. But this is another, like, if I've got 2 guys, like I'm gonna take these tomorrow. I've been out of these for a long time and just got these. But I'm always I just dropped on the ground, about fell off the couch while I was trying to scoot up. 2 people throwing topwaters in the morning. This is an awesome bait to kind of cover that mid water column. Spinner bait's a good bait as well. Gold spoon's a good bait, but like if I'm not focused on like fishing into that flooded grass, Something like this is a really good way to draw bites. You'll catch trout and redfish on it. And the cool thing about this bait is you can straight retrieve it. Like you can pretty much retrieve this however you want to. You can reel it straight back in. You can like twitch. It'll kind of cut around like a like a mirror lure, pause and suspend. But they got a lot of colors of this, and it's a really cool bait. I don't think I've ever seen a bait that swims better in the water than the Magic Swimmer does. It's a really unique action that you get from it, and a good tool for searching that middle water column. And a big trout killer, like big speckled trout will eat that bait and about rip it out of your hand. So, did you ever fish that Sebile Magic Swimmer back when Sebile was a company?
No, I didn't.
That's a cool one. There's some guys that love them for tarpon down in the South.
Really?
Yeah, I guess we're in the South, but down in Florida. But Allen's got a pile of. They make some really big ones, some like 7-8 inch ones. Pretty cool. Expensive though.
I bet stripers would tear those up.
Oh yeah, I think that they're pretty popular for striper fishing in some areas. Yeah, it's definitely a very cool bait. Trying to think what else. Any other topwater plugs you've messed around with besides? Have you fished any of the prop baits like the Chopo or the Whopper Flop or anything like that?
No, not so much. Not so much. I mean, I think for bigger redfish, I think there's more. The opportunity with different styles of baits is a little bit broader, right? That thing for big redfish would probably work. For our skittish little puppy drum here in southeastern North Carolina, not so much.
Yeah, that's what I've seen with it, with the prop bait for small redfish. It seems to freak them out.
Yeah, they just dart.
They run from it. Yeah, but in Louisiana, they freaking tank this thing. They'll eat the mess out of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Louisiana is just a weird place. Sheep's head eat chatterbaits down there. I think that's so wild.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody has caught a sheep's head on topwater down there at some point. In Louisiana.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
That's a place where dreams come true as far as inshore fishing goes for redfish, black drum, and trout. I was pretty fired up when I saw this thing though for bull reds, like for Louisiana and whatnot. The hooks that come on this Chopo 110 I'll switch over to my camera. Insanely stout. I don't know if you can see there, but I would feel very, very comfortable out of the box throwing that to a 30, 40 pound redfish. Which in areas where you've got those big redfish around, like the Pamlico Sound right now, all those guys that are trout fishing up there, like it's worth putting some stouter hooks on your topwaters because those big redfish will be up there in 1 foot, 2 feet of water sometimes, and they'll smoke your topwater plug. I was up fishing with my friend Bud Bishop, Mott Ridge Charters, up on the Pamlico Sound the other day, and we struggled on the big bulls and the pop and cork, but we got shallow and started pop and corking for slot drum, and he ended up hooking a big 30-pound fish and like a 1.5 foot of water was up there. We actually were fishing in all this bait for big redfish, and I would like look over near the bank. We're way off the bank, and I see like this orange float moving. I like have it lined up with one tree, and like I see it gets to the next tree. I'm like, there's a fish attached to that cork in there swimming around. So we went in there. There's a ton of slot drum up on the bank, and then there was some big ones laid up in there too. But in those areas where like one fish could be 20 inches and the next fish could be 40 inches, like you want to make sure you've got those stout hooks on your plug so you don't bend them out. But yeah, it's funny, those bigger fish are definitely more aggressive on what they eat. I remember me and Alan and Adam caught them on one of those wake bait rats one time, one of those big rats down in Louisiana.
So did you said you saw a popping cork just floating and moving along the bank?
Yeah.
Did you follow it, or did you just kind of see it slowly swim off into the distance?
No, it kept hanging out in the zone. It would like swim up the bank a little bit and turn around and swim back down the bank. So as we were watching that too, then we saw a couple redfish go nuts on some bait and start blowing some bait up like 20 yards down from it. But it was funny. It was really cool to watch how that fish acted, like to know where he was moving when you couldn't see him.
Right.
Because there was this small little depression. It was all like 1 foot deep. And then there was this small depression that was coming off the bank where like an old creek mouth was. And he would like kind of go up shallow and like look around for a little bit and then come back, and you would see the cork stop, like where it was like maybe 8 inches deeper. And he would kind of lay up in there. And we got in there. Both times we got there, the first time we hooked a redfish, fought that fish spooked, left, like the cork went under for like 5-10 minutes. And the next thing you know, like it pops up again and it's like swimming back to that depression and like stops in that depression. And what we could learn just in that short amount of time watching that cork, it made me want to go and put some corks on some fish in some areas. But we could immediately figure out where that school was. Like we'd come back over to where that cork was, and whether we caught them or not, we would at least mud the group of fish out around the cork.
Right.
So when I was in Louisiana too, this is unfortunate, but there's a lot of big redfish tournaments down there. And you'd go up into a pond and you'd see a cork swimming around, and we would always like try to throw a jig around the line and like snag the cork and bring the fish in. But every single time it wasn't broken off. Guys were catching those fish out of those schools and taking a needle, I'm guessing taking like a sewing needle, and stitching leader through their lip and putting a cork to it and then letting the fish go. And that way they could roll up into those ponds during those tournaments and know exactly where the school was sitting. Like they didn't have to take the time to fish around the bank. They could see that cork and go over there and catch all the fish around the cork and then leave the pond. But 3 different times we found that.
That's messed up.
It's messed up, especially for tournament fishing. But man, from a guiding standpoint, that's awesome. It takes away all the guessing.
Yeah, right.
But it was cool to see that cork continue to come back to that depression, like the little nuances. Like it would be pretty cool to go into an area, a big bay or something, catch a couple fish, tie some corks to them, let them go, and just watch them for like an hour or two, and then go, snag the cork and cut it back off, just to kind of understand their habits of like how they orient to stuff. Like that fish was, you think these fish, because we just get like little glimpses into their actions, like even sight fishing, like you just see them for a few seconds, and like you oftentimes bump them off the same spots. Like you don't see them, you're like, oh crap, we should have made a blind cast on the tip of that oyster bar. There's always one that I mud out right there. But like being able to like step back and see them, how they move around and where they come back to and how long it takes for them to come back and set up on a spot. And every time, like the first time he was really tight to the bank in that depression, and every time we bumped him, he was like a little bit further off the bank, but still kind of coming back to that same depression, which is kind of what you see with like the shallow redfish we've got here. It's like you pull down a bank one time, there's fish all over belly crawling. You're like, God, we got to come down that bank again. It was really good. And the next time you come down, there's like a few belly crawling, but you start mudding a bunch like 15 feet off the bank. And then like the third time you don't see them, or you're maybe pulling inside of them and they're sitting out deeper. So it's those little things that you can pay attention to. But it got me fired up watching that cork and kind of understanding how that fish was acting. But I still can't believe how I saw it. I mean, we were good like 400 yards away from it. It was a tiny little popping cork, but bright orange, it stands out.
Yeah, right.
Trying to think anything else topwater wise we can talk about. We've got the the trout to talk about a little bit. We can get into that. I don't know if we want to just talk redfish, but have you had any trout on topwater lately? I know you don't typically target trout much yourself until the fall. You're more of a redfish guy, but have you had any trout bycatch?
I had one pretty good one. This was probably a month or two ago now. It was, I think, like 25 inches. He was a fat trout.
Heck yeah.
He was, I think, between 23 and 25 inches or so. But really just a bycatch. Was casting in an area that I had caught redfish in previously, and working across a creek mouth, and right at the corner of it was a tiny little gut, and right at the corner of it, a trout just came up and smoked it. And beyond that, nothing really substantial, nothing big. A couple small ones here and there, but not, like you said, I'm not really targeting trout too much until it starts heating up a little bit.
Heating up as it cools down.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, this time of year, that's the one time, like we're talking about fishing a topwater at low tide, or like the tail end of a falling tide, or the first of an incoming. This is a good time of year to get big trout during that tide, like in some areas that they're hanging out, pulled off that structure a little bit, or pulled off where you might be catching them at like a mid tide. But that lower tide, man, as those mullet are really getting funneled hard. Like obviously the lower the water, the tighter your mullet are, the more you're seeing mullet get blown up, and that's a good time to catch the trout on topwater. We've got like that rock wall in the river where you get a lot of bait stirred up on that mid to low falling tide or incoming low to mid. It's a great time to throw a topwater for a trout. But it seems like for me, like the calmer conditions, I definitely do better on the trout on the calmer conditions and whatnot. But
Yeah.
the last thing I think we should get into, and some people say it totally matters, some people say it doesn't, some people have confidence in some, but color. Is there like a go-to color you like? Why do you think that color? If so, why do you think that color is effective?
Yeah, I definitely. Man, I do think color matters a little bit. I tend to see, you know, I have my favorites.
Yeah.
Right. I think like the hot pink is a really good color for me, as well as this color, the orange and black color, and I don't know what it is maybe the contrast as it's going like this throughout the water, and kind of zigging and zagging back and forth. It just, I think the fish tend to be able to see it from a greater distance as opposed to some other colors. And I think that's really what it comes down to is contrast, and that can be dependent upon the conditions that you're given, right? Water clarity, light conditions. So picking that color based off of what contrasts well within the environment is key, and what allows you to not necessarily catch fish or don't catch fish, but just increase that opportunity and allow you to catch more fish,
For
right?
sure.
So fish are able to see it from a greater distance.
For sure. Yeah.
But I mean, I've caught fish on clear plugs where you can barely see the thing, and they're just kind of hunting based off of just that, that vibration and that energy. But more often than not, I feel like I'm getting a better hookup ratio or a better blow up ratio on plugs of certain colors.
Do you feel like the color has anything to do with, or what color has anything to do with like the amount of light you have, like a darker color in low light, or a brighter color in during bright? What?
Yeah.
How does that affect your choice?
Exactly what you said, right? Darker colors, darker environments; lighter colors, lighter environments.
Yeah.
If the water's a little bit more clean and clear and brighter skies, I'll tend to throw something a little brighter, maybe a yellow, or maybe a pink or something like that. But a lot of times when I'm fishing topwater plugs, it's lower light, early morning, late evening, cloudy skies. So I'm fishing that darker orange and black color.
Yeah.
So.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree. For me, it's like I like a bone white.
Yeah.
Or like
White.
I guess it's a bone. It's not a bone white. It's bone colored. Then Spook has this head and has like a bone with like a little orange under the chin that I like a lot. It's funny. Like I feel like so much of it is just what we like. Like, ooh, that's a cool looking plug. Like I'm gonna throw that one. Like it doesn't really matter. But that bone's a good color. Chartreuse is a good color. Like this is a great topwater plug color. Is that like a little orange, some chartreuse, and some silver?
Yeah.
Like Skitterwalk makes one like that. Head makes. Everyone's got that chartreuse, orange, and silver color. That 808 color you're talking about, and then that's the one I dropped. But any of those natural ones too. The frog color is a good color. Little chartreuse on the belly or orange on the belly.
What would be your favorite color?
The one the color I've caught the most fish on is probably that 808 color. That orange belly, gold and black, like the Skitterwalk that everyone throws around here. For redfish, at least. For trout, I think a chartreuse and silver, chartreuse and white, one knocker probably is or a Spook Junior. It's probably my most productive color and lure.
What's your favorite plug, would you say?
Man,
you have one?
I haven't fished them for too long, but the way that the J Walker 100, the smaller Berkeley plug works is I've really liked that plug. The redfish have been eating it well. and the colors that they have are just different. Like so, there's so many of the companies are just making like the exact same colors, and
Yeah.
some of the natural colors that they've got. Like in dirty water, I don't think it doesn't matter too much, but in that cleaner water, I really do think that a natural looking bait can definitely, or topwater can definitely help you get bit for sure. So, but I don't know. There's so many good colors out there.
Have you
It's
tried?
fun to have lots of different colors just for yourself to like open your box up and be like, ah.
I hear you.
But
Have you tried any of the Yazuri plugs?
yeah, I have that 3D minnow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried that, and that's the one clear plug I have. I've got one clear plug, and it's that Yozuri one. I've done
Do
good
you
on the
like?
trout, like when the trout are on glass minnows.
Hmm.
That plug has worked well for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good wrap up though for our late summer top water. It seems like about 3 or 4 times a year we'll try to do a top water episode just because things can change a little bit. Um, but as far as where to throw them, go look for schools of mullet getting blown up. Look for areas that they're getting, stuck in pockets or getting funneled around oyster bars or points and whatnot, and just throw that topwater and don't get sucked into an area too long. Like even if you got 2 or 3 fish in there or 2 or 3 blow ups, like if you go 5 minutes without a bite, like keep working that bank. That's the cool thing about a topwater is it's going to help you find fish. But just keep throwing it, keep working it, and don't set the hook till you feel the pressure.
That's right.
That is right. Well, dude, thanks for doing the podcast with me tonight, you guys. If y'all want to book a trip with me or Jeff, just hit us up, and we'd love to get you out and do some topwater fishing. Here in North Carolina, it's going to do nothing but get better. We got albacore showing up soon. Do a little fly fishing and sight fishing for albacore. Speckled trout's right around the corner. Speckled trouts, I always, everyone thinks fall. You can catch them really good all year, but that migratory push of speckled trout is just around the corner, about another month, and we'll start to see those fish trickle in. So hit us up. I'd love to get you out there, but you got any words of wisdom to leave them with? You got to come up with something.
Oh man, don't set the hook. Well, you already said that, but yeah, reiterating that is the most important thing. Don't set the hook till you feel that pressure. Just keep ticking.
Yeah, don't count your fish until they're in the live well.
There you go.
Later, y'all. See you next week.